The apartment smelled of stale air and old wood when Lena first stepped inside, but it was the only place she could afford. She told herself the peeling wallpaper and creaking floors added character, but the bathroom unsettled her the most. The rust-stained sink, the flickering light, and, worst of all, the mark on the wall. It was small at first, barely noticeable, a faint, irregular blotch near the shower. But the shape was unmistakable. A human eye, its pupil a darker shade of damp, the edges like lashes. Lena scrubbed at it with bleach, but the stain only seemed to darken, as if absorbing her efforts. By the third day it had expanded, the iris now the size of a coin. The landlord, a bored man with a cigarette perpetually dangling from his lips, scoffed when she mentioned it. Old pipes, he said. Happens all the time in these buildings. But Lena didn't believe him. She could feel it. The way the air thickened when she entered the bathroom, the prickling sense of being observed. Sometimes, when the light hit the stain just right, she swore the pupil contracted, as if reacting to her presence. At night, she avoided looking at it, keeping her showers brief and her eyes fixed on the tiles. But once, as she reached for her towel, her gaze flickered to the wall, and the stain pulsed. A slow, deliberate blink. She stumbled back, her breath hitching. When she looked again, it was still. Just a stain. Just water damage. But the next morning, the eye was larger. And it was watching her. The whispers began on the third night. Soft, insistent murmurs that slithered through the cracks of the bathroom door. Lena jolted awake, her heart pounding, the words "open your eyes" lingering in the air like a taunt. She clutched the blanket tightly, straining to listen. The voice wasn't coming from outside the apartment, it was inside the walls. Swallowing her fear, she crept toward the bathroom, the wooden floor creaking under her bare feet. The moment she flipped the light switch, the whispers stopped. The bathroom was empty, save for the eerie eye-shaped stain on the wall, now slightly larger than before. The space felt colder, as though something had been breathing in the dark just seconds ago. The next morning, she questioned her neighbor Mr. Chen, an elderly man who had lived in the building for decades. His weathered face darkened when she mentioned the whispers. The last person in that apartment, he muttered, a young man, gone within a month. Never found his things, never found him. He refused to say more, shutting his door firmly behind him. That night, the whispers returned, louder this time, the words twisting into a chorus of hushed voices. Open your eyes. Lena pressed her ear to the bathroom wall, recoiling when she felt a faint vibration, as if something was pressing back. A damp, rotten smell filled the air. When she pulled away, the stain had split open like a seam, a thin, black liquid oozing from the crack. She stumbled back, her breath ragged. The whispers dissolved into laughter. The stain pulsed as if watching her, and for the first time she wondered, was it inviting her to look deeper, or warning her to run? Lena stood frozen in the bathroom, her breath shallow as she stared at the wall. What had once been a vague, discolored stain now bore the unmistakable shape of an eye, pupil, iris, and all. It was lifelike, eerily so. The edges of the stain had darkened, forming a perfect outline, and the center gleamed with a wet, glassy sheen. As she inched closer, a cold draft brushed her neck, and the eye blinked. Her stomach lurched. She stumbled back, heart pounding, but the eye followed her. No matter where she moved in the cramped bathroom, its gaze remained locked onto her, unblinking. The air grew thick, humming with an unnatural energy. She couldn't tear herself away. Late nights became sleepless marathons of staring, drawn back to the bathroom like a moth to a flame. The whispers from the walls grew louder, but she no longer heard them. The eye consumed all her attention. When May came over, Lena barely registered her presence until her friend's horrified gasp broke the trance. May stood in the doorway, face pale, pointing at the wall. What the hell is that? She demanded, voice trembling. Lena turned, realizing how absurd it must look, her perched on the bathroom floor, fixated on a stain. A flicker of doubt crossed May's eyes when Lena insisted it moved. Then the eye blinked again. May screamed. It's watching us, Lena murmured, almost reverently. May grabbed her arm, yanking her out of the bathroom and slamming the door shut. You need to get out of this apartment, now. The urgency in her voice was sharp, desperate, but Lena barely heard her. The eye's pull was too strong. By the time May stormed out, promising to return with help, Lena was already reaching for the doorknob, ready to see it again. Lena stood frozen in front of the bathroom mirror, her breath fogging the glass as she stared at her own reflection. Or what should have been her reflection. Instead, a grotesque figure loomed behind her, its elongated limbs twitching unnaturally. It mimicked her movements, but with a delay, as if lagging just slightly behind reality. Its face was a blur of shadows, save for one horrifying feature, a third eye, pulsing and wet, embedded in its forehead. The eye locked onto hers, unblinking, Lena's throat tightened as the figure's lips curled into a smirk, revealing jagged, needle-like teeth. She tried to step back, but her reflection didn't follow. It stayed put, tilting its head as if studying her. Then, with a jerk, it raised a hand. Too many fingers, too long, and pressed its palm against the glass from the other side. That night, Lena's dreams were no longer her own. She found herself trapped in a shifting nightmare, standing in the same bathroom, but the walls were slick with something dark and viscous. The Watcher's voice slithered into her mind, whispering names: Emma, Daniel, Sophia, each one punctuated by a flash of a terrified face, their eyes wide as they clawed at the air, as if something unseen were dragging them into the walls. When she woke, gasping, the smell of rust filled her nose. The stain on the bathroom wall had spread, the edges now creeping toward the ceiling like veins. And in the mirror, though she stood perfectly still, her reflection blinked, slowly, deliberately. With all three eyes, Lena awoke with a start, her throat dry and her heart pounding. The apartment was silent, too silent. May had promised to stay the night, but the space beside her on the couch was empty, the blanket tossed aside as if she'd left in a hurry. Lena called Mai's name, her voice echoing through the cramped living room. No reply. She checked her phone first. No messages, no missed calls. May wouldn't just leave without a word. The bathroom door was slightly ajar, and Lena's stomach twisted as she approached. The air inside was thick with a damp, metallic scent. The eye on the wall was wider now, its pupil dilated, as if it had just finished feasting. Then she saw it. Scrawled in jagged, frantic strokes across the fog-up mirror. She saw too much. The words gleamed wetly, as though written in something other than water. Lena's knees buckled. May's phone lay on the sink, shattered, the screen dark. The shower curtain was torn, one side hanging limply, its torn edges frayed like claw marks. Lena staggered back, her mind racing. The Watcher had taken May, just like the previous tenant Mr. Chen had mentioned. She remembered Mai's terrified face the night before, her insistence that they leave the apartment immediately after seeing the eye on the wall. May had whispered, "It's hungry." Ace mom. Now May was gone, and Lena knew, with a sinking certainty, that she was next. Lena's hands trembled as she flipped through the brittle pages of an old newspaper she'd found tucked away in the apartment building's basement. The dim light from her phone barely illuminated the faded text, but what she read made her blood run cold. The article detailed a series of disappearances dating back decades, all tenants of her apartment. Each victim had reported strange occurrences before vanishing without a trace. Digging deeper, she uncovered a mention of a cult that had once operated in the building, performing rituals to summon an entity they called the Watcher. The cult believed the creature could grant them visions of the future, but the rituals went horribly wrong, trapping the spirit in the walls of the apartment. Her research led her to a handwritten journal hidden beneath a loose floorboard in her bedroom. The previous tenant, a woman named Yuna, had scribbled frantic notes about the eye on the wall and the whispers that haunted her. The final entry was a desperate plea: "It feeds on fear. It grows stronger every time you look. The only way to stop it is to stop seeing it, or face it." Lena's stomach churned as she realized the horrible choice before her. She could blind herself, severing her connection to the Watcher, or she could confront the entity directly, risking her sanity, or worse. As she sat there, the bathroom door creaked open on its own, and the faint sound of whispering filled the air. The voice was clearer now, almost amused. "Open your eyes," it taunted. Lena clenched her fists, tears welling up. She couldn't live like this anymore, jumping at shadows, losing everyone around her. May was gone, and she knew the Watcher would come for her next. With a shaky breath, she made her decision. She wouldn't flee. She wouldn't blind herself. She would face the Watcher, and end this. Lena stood trembling in the bathroom, her heart pounding so loudly it drowned out the dripping faucet. The Watcher loomed before her in the mirror, its inky form shifting like smoke, the third eye pulsing with a sickly light. It had tormented her for weeks, stealing her sleep, her peace, and now her friend. May's disappearance had been the final straw. Lena knew she had to end this. Tonight. The air grew thick, pressing against her skin like a suffocating hand. The Watcher's gaze locked onto hers, its voice slithering into her mind. "You cannot escape. You are mine." But this time, Lena didn't flinch. She forced herself to stare back, her fists clenched, refusing to blink. The eye on the wall throbbed in sync with the one on the entity's forehead, a grotesque symmetry that made her stomach churn. A sharp pain lanced through her skull as the Watcher fought to dominate her, to force her to look away. Visions of its past victims flashed before her, faces twisted in terror, their eyes gouged out, their mouths frozen in silent screams. Lena gritted her teeth, tears streaming down her cheeks. No, she whispered. I see you, and I'm not afraid. The entity let out a guttural shriek, its form wavering like a dying flame. The bathroom lights flickered violently as the mirror cracked, spiderwebbing outward from the center. The watcher's eye bulged, then exploded in a burst of black ichor, splattering across the tiles. The stain on the wall shriveled and peeled away, leaving only a faint, ashen residue. As the room fell silent, Lena stumbled back, gasping. Her reflection was hers again, except for a thin, jagged scar between her brows, tingling with a residual warmth. She touched it lightly, shuddering. It was over. But as she turned to leave, the faintest whisper echoed in the drain, "You will see me again." The scar pulsed once, and Lena knew the watcher wasn't truly gone. It was waiting, and next time, it wouldn't be so easy to look away. The apartment smelled of dust and old wood when Sophie first stepped inside, but she barely noticed. It was hers now, a fresh start after months of crashing on friends' couches. The landlord, Mr. Harlow, had been oddly insistent about the rules: no nails in the walls, no pets, and most peculiar of all, never under any circumstances cover the bathroom mirror. Sophie had laughed it off at the time, assuming it was some superstitious quirk. The mirror itself was antique, its edges etched with strange symbols that looked like a mix of hieroglyphs and something far older. She traced a finger over the markings, shuddering at the unnatural chill in the glass. The first night, Sophie barely slept. The apartment creaked and groaned like a living thing, every settling beam sounding like a footstep. But it wasn't the noise that kept her awake. It was the whispering. Faint at first, barely audible over the hum of the radiator, it grew louder as the hours dragged on. The voices, if they were voices, seemed to come from behind the mirror, a garbled murmur of syllables that made her skin prickle. She told herself it was just the pipes or the wind, but by 3 a.m., she was sitting upright in bed, heart pounding, convinced the whispers were forming words. In the dim glow of her phone light, she approached the mirror. The symbols seemed to shift under her gaze, slithering like snakes. Then, for the briefest moment, her reflection blinked, but she hadn't. Sophie stumbled backward, gasping. The whispering stopped. Silence filled the apartment again, heavy and waiting. She spent the rest of the night on the couch, watching the bathroom door, wondering if she'd imagined it all. But as dawn broke, one thought lodged in her mind like a splinter: the mirror wasn't just marked, it was watching. Sophie's fingers trembled as she reached for the towel, her reflection flickering in the dim bathroom light. The whispers had grown louder tonight, a chorus of hoarse, guttural murmurs slithering from behind the mirror. She couldn't take it anymore. With a sharp inhale, she yanked the towel from the rack and draped it over the glass, blocking the unnerving sight of her own wide, terrified eyes. The moment the fabric touched the mirror, the whispers stopped. Silence. Then, a wet, ragged breath, so close it could have been right against her ear. She stumbled back, heart hammering. The air thickened, the scent of damp earth and something metallic clinging to her skin. A chill crawled up her spine, wrapping around her like invisible hands. That night she barely slept. Every creak of the old apartment made her jerk awake, her breath catching in her throat. When morning came, she dragged herself to the bathroom, peeling the towel away with hesitant fingers. The markings on the mirror seemed darker, the symbols more pronounced, as if they'd been freshly carved. But worse were the bruises. Dark, fingertip-sized splotches dotted her upper arms, her collarbone, the inside of her wrists. They didn't hurt, but their presence sent a sickening ripple of dread through her. She prodded one half, expecting it to vanish under her touch. It didn't. Something had touched her in the night, something unseen. That evening, she caught movement in the periphery of her vision, a shadow flitting just beyond sight. The whispers returned, this time punctuated by soft, wet clicks, like something tapping against glass. Sophie wrapped her arms around herself, nails digging into the fresh bruises. The mirror was watching, and whatever was behind it was reaching through. Sophie had hoped the bruising would stop, but every morning, new purplish marks bloomed across her arms like ink spreading in water. She avoided the mirror as much as possible, keeping it veiled with a thick towel, but the whispers had grown louder. No longer a murmur behind the glass, but something closer, as if the speaker's lips grazed her ear. Desperate for answers, she knocked on her neighbor's door, the only other apartment on the floor. An elderly woman, Mrs. Chen, answered. Her wary eyes darted over Sophie's face before lingering on the faint bruise peeking from her collar. "You covered the mirror, didn't you, Mrs. Chen?" sighed. The question wasn't accusatory, only resigned. Sophie hesitated before admitting the truth. Mrs. Chen ushered her inside. The apartment smelled of dried herbs and aged paper. "The woman before you, Lena. She lasted only 2 weeks after she covered it. Then she was gone." She pulled a tattered journal from a drawer, its pages brittle. left this behind when they cleared her things. Sophie flipped through it. Most entries were mundane, groceries, errands, but one passage near the end made her blood freeze. It watches through the glass. It calls itself the third eye. Says it's been waiting. If I look too long, I can see it staring back, not in the reflection, but behind it. I think it's learning my face. The entry ended abruptly. The next page was torn out. Mrs. Chen leaned close, voice dropping to a whisper. Lena was hearing things too. Then she started seeing them. They say mirrors are gateways. Some doors shouldn't be opened. Sophie left with the journal clutched to her chest. That night, she dreamed of a leadless eye staring from the darkness. When she woke, panting, she looked at the mirror, still covered. But from beneath the towel's edge, something glistened in the dark, wet, watchful. Sophie's nights became a relentless cycle of terror. Every time she closed her eyes, the same nightmare consumed her, a vast, endless void where a single, unblinking eye floated in the darkness, its pupil dilated like a black hole. It watched her, studied her, as if peeling back layers of her soul. She'd wake gasping, her sheets damp with sweat, only to catch movement in the bathroom mirror, a shadowy figure lingering just beyond the glass, its form indistinct but undeniably present. At first, she blamed exhaustion or the stress of moving, but the figure grew clearer with each passing night. One evening, she swore she saw it tilt its head, as if amused by her fear.